as accurately as a surface dweller might follow the sun's trail. A moment later, Belwar nodded and pointed down the appropriate tunnel.
West,
Belwar said.
and quickly. The more distance you put between yourself and that mother of yours, the safer we shall all be.
He paused to consider Drizzt for a long moment, wondering if he might be prodding his new friend a bit too deeply with his next question. What is it? Drizzt asked, recognizing his apprehension. Belwar decided to risk it, to see just how close he and Drizzt had become.
When first you learned that you were the reason for the drow activity in the eastern tunnels,
The deep gnome began bluntly.
you seemed a bit weak in the knees, if you understand me. They are your family, Dark Elf. Are they so terrible?
Drizzt's chuckle put Belwar at ease, told the deep gnome that he had not pressed too far. Come, Drizzt said, seeing Guinevere return from the scouting track. If the deception of the camp is complete, then let us take our first steps into our new life. Our road should be long enough for tales of my home and family.
Hold,
Said Belwar. He reached into his pouch and produced a small coffin.
a gift from King Schnicktick.
He exclaimed as he lifted the lid and removed a glowing brooch, its quiet illumination bathing the area around them. Drizzt stared at the burrow warden in disbelief. It will mark you as a fine target, the drow remarked. Belwar corrected.
It will mark us as fine targets.
He said with a sly snort.
But fear not, Dark Elf. The light will keep more enemies at bay than it will bring. I am not so fond of tripping on crags and chips in the floor.
How long will it glow? Drizzt asked. And Belwar gathered from his tone that the drow hoped it would fade soon.
Forever is the Driamr,
Belwar replied with a wide smirk.
unless some priest or wizard counters it. Stop your worrying. What creatures of the Underdark would willingly walk into an illuminated area?
Drizzt shrugged and trusted in the experienced burrow warden's judgment. Very well, he said, shaking his white mane helplessly. And off for the road.
The road and the tails,
Replied Belwar, falling into step beside Drizzt, his stout little legs rolling along to keep up with the drow's long and graceful strides. They walked for many hours, stopped for a meal, then walked for many more. Sometimes Belwar used his illuminating brooch. Other times the friends walked in darkness, depending on whether or not they perceived danger in the area. Guinevere was frequently about, yet rarely seen, the panther eagerly taking up its appointed duties as a perimeter guard. For a 10 days straight, the companions stopped only when weariness or hunger forced a break in the march, for they were anxious to be as far from Blingdenstone, and from those hunting Drizzt, as possible. Still, another full 10-day would pass before the companions moved out into tunnels that Belwar did not know. The deep gnome had been a burrow warden for almost 50 years.
Hey, cheers, everyone. Give me 1 second.
this place is known to me.
Belwar often remarked when they entered a cabin.
Took a wagon of iron.
He would say, or milk, or a multitude of other precious minerals that Drizzt had never even heard of. And though the burrow wardens extended tales of those mining
Give me 1 second. I gotta grab
some
something real
the
quick.
same direction. How many ways can a deep gnome chop stone? Drizzt always listened intently, savoring every word. He knew the alternative. For his part in the story, Drizzt recounted his adventures in Menzo Berenzon's academy and his many fond memories of Zaknafin and the training jail. He showed Belwar the double-thrust blow and how the pupil had discovered a parry to counter the attack, to his mentor's surprise and pain. Drizzt displayed the intricate hand and facial
Yeah,
expressions of the
appreciate
silent
it.
drow code, and he briefly entertained the notion of teaching
How you doing,
him to
Patrick?
drow. The
Where'd my
deep
phone
gnome
go now?
often
Give me 1
burst into
second.
loud and rolling laughter.
Just misplacing everything.
Dark eyes looked incredulously at Drizzt, and he led the drow's gaze down to the ends of his arms.
Let me hit your bell too, Patrick.
The Zvrtneblin could hardly muster enough gestures
Ring
to
that
make
bell.
the effort worthwhile. Still, Belwar appreciated that Drizzt had offered to teach him the sign.
But Scratchy with D-Man, these are the other. Remember I said I had those other two in the series that I haven't done yet?
Often, Belwar would fall into a deep slumber, only to be awakened by prickling in his legs, fast asleep.
That one, and that one still.
Always grumbled and swatted Guinevere on the rump with his hammerhand. It became a game between the two.
Oh, were you?
Truly didn't mind the panther being so close. In fact,
And of course I got these other ones that I finished.
which always left one so vulnerable in the wilds, much easier to come by. Do you understand? He whispered to Guinevere one day. Off to the side, Belwar was fast asleep, flat on his back on the stone, using a rock for a pillow. Drizzt shook his head and continued amazement when he studied the little figure. He was beginning to
I don't know if you can see it, but they're both
carried their affinity with the earth
30 by 30 centimeters. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with when I finish the other two of this.
Only a few minutes later, Belwar awoke with a snort.
Because since they're as small as they are, I think this one probably take me longer just because I have all the different colors switching around in it.
Marga camera cat.
Belwar roared again. He wiggled his toes frantically, trying futilely to keep the circulation going and dismiss the tingles that had already begun.
Away with you!
The Burrow Warden propped himself up on one elbow and swung his hammerhand at Guinevere's back.
I definitely had to look into how to sell those. I have no idea how to even price them.
Pivoted completely and leaped atop Belwar, burying him and pinning him flat to the stone.
Hey, Florida, how you doing?
Belwar managed to get his face out from under Guinevere's muscled chest.
Get yourself
Let me go
off
ahead
me
and
or suffer the consequences.
ring your bell too.
The deep gnome growled, obviously an empty threat. Guinevere shifted, getting a bit more comfortable in its perch.
Definitely appreciate it.
Dark Elf!
Belwar called as loudly as he dared.
Dark Elf! Take your panther away! Dark Elf!
Give me 1 second, everyone.
Walking in from
I'm going to turn the camera off, but I'll still be here able to talk. I'm just
Are you two playing again? I had thought my time was century near to its end.
eating a snack, and I don't really want everyone to watch me have to eat, but I'll still be here talking.
But the Zvrtneblins were
Just give me 1 second.
black fur as Guinevere shifted again. Drizzt could see Belwar's long, hooked nose, though, crinkle up in irritation. Oh, no, said Drizzt. I am not so tired.
Hell yeah.
Interrupting your game. I know that
Oh, damn, it's 2 a.m. for you? Or 2:30? For me, it's about 12:30, so you're about 2 hours ahead.
Dark Elf!
Belwar grumbled at his back as Drizzt departed. But the drow kept going, and Guinevere, with Drizzt's blessings, soon fell fast asleep. Drizzt crouched low and held very still, letting his eyes go through the dramatic shift from infravision, viewing the heat of objects in the infrared spectrum.
I would too if I was able to sleep at night, but
Even before the transfer,
I have a mild case of insomnia.
Drizzt could tell that his guess had been correct. Ahead, beyond the low natural archway, came a red glow.
Because Scratchy D-Man, you see my have you seen the up close one of my other one that I did that's behind me in my live? So if not, I'll go get it real quick and show you.
Saw the red glow beyond the archway and understood Drizzt's caution. Can you bring the panther? The Burrow Warden asked quietly. Drizzt shook his head. The magic is limited by spans of time.
Oh shit.
Walking the material plane tirelessly, the panther needs to rest. Perhaps the little king could go.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Perhaps there is another tunnel along 5 miles. Considering the see what is ahead. The burrow reasoned, and he started boldly off. Drizzt liked Belwar's straightforward attitude and quickly joined him. Beyond the archway, which Drizzt had to crouch nearly double to get under, they found a wide and high cavern, its floor and walls covered in a moss-like growth that emitted the red light. Drizzt pulled up short, at a loss, but Belwar recognized the stuff well enough.
Baruchis,
The burrow warden blurted, the word turning into a chuckle. He turned to Drizzt and, not seeing any reaction to his smile, explained.
Crimson Spitters, Dark Elf. Not for decades have I seen such a patch of the stuff. Quite a rare sight they are, you know.
Drizzt, still at a loss, shook the tenseness out of his muscles and shrugged, then started forward. Belwar's pick hand hooked him under the arm, and the powerful deep gnome spun him back abruptly.
Crimson Spitters,
The burrow warden said again, pointedly emphasizing the latter of the words.
Naga Camera, Dark Elf. How did you get along through the years?
Belwar turned aside and slammed his camera into the
Give me 1 second. Get back in position.
Chunk of stone. He scooped this up in the flat of his pick hand and flipped it off to the side of the cavern. The stone.
You have a good one too.
With a soft thud, then a burst of smoke and spears blasted into the air.
Spit,
Explained Belwar.
and choke you to death with the spore. If you plan to cross here, walk lightly, my brave, foolish friend.
Drizzt scratched his unkempt white locks and considered the predicament. He had no desire to return the 5 miles down the tunnel, but neither did he plan to go plodding through this field of red death. He stood tall just inside the archway and looked around for
So I
some
can get it without the glare.
Several stones, a possible walkway, rose up out of the baruchis, and beyond them lay a trail of clear stone about 10 feet wide, running perpendicular to the archway across
But yeah, it's a good size one.
he told Belwar. There's a clear path.
There always is in a field of baruchis.
The burrow warden replied under his breath. Drizzt's keen ears caught the comment. What do you mean?
Hell yeah, scratching D, man.
The first of the raised stones.
A grubber is about,
The deep gnome explained.
or has been.
A grubber? Drizzt prudently hopped back to stand beside the burrow warden.
Big caterpillar.
Belwar.
Grubbers love baruchis.
I think it was,
The Crimson Spitters do not seem to bother.
actually, I have it written down. Give me 1 second.
How
I
wide
gotta
is
go
the
grab my
clear
little
path?
book.
Belwar asked. 10 feet, perhaps? Drizzt answered, hopping back out to the first stepping stone to view it again. Belwar considered the answer for a moment.
1 pass for a big grubber, 2 for most.
Drizzt hopped back to the side of the burrow warden again, giving a cautious look over his shoulder. Big caterpillar, he remarked.
There we go. I'm back, guys.
But with a little mouth.
Belwar explained.
Grubbers eat only moss and molds, and baruchis if they can find them. Peaceful enough creatures, all in all.
That one is
Sprang out to the stone.
40 by 50 centimeters.
He asked in exasperation. Belwar shook his head. Drizzt led the way across the stones, and soon the two companions.
But I just have it in like one of those frames you get at Walmart. I sealed it too with the sealer, like glue sealer. Let it cure, and then
understood Belwar's hesitation, for he too felt the vibrations in the stone under his feet.
Grubber,
Said Belwar.
stand quiet and watch, my friend. They are quite a sight.
Drizzt smiled wide and crouched.
yeah, that's the one that's 40 by or
When he heard a quick shuffle behind him, Drizzt
40 by
felt
50
a
centimeters.
of sorts. Where? Drizzt began to ask when he turned about and saw
And that was my
flight toward the other exit.
very first one.
Speaking abruptly, when an explosion like the crash of a cave-in erupted from the other way, the way he had been watching.
Quite
Yeah.
a sight.
I wrote down the sizes in
He
inches.
couldn't deny the truth of the deep gnome's words when the grubber made its appearance. It was
Now I
huge,
can read it
bigger
better
than a
when I
basilisk
get
Drizzt
other
had
ones.
killed, and looked like a gigantic pale gray worm, except for the multitude
Because
of
that's
little
why
feet pumping along the
this
side
one
of
came
massive
out
torso.
as
Drizzt
small
saw
as
that
it
Belwar
did.
had not lied, for the thing
It was
had
because
no
I
mouth
read
to speak of, and no
the
talons or
measurements
other
in
apparent weapon.
centimeters wrong,
But
and
the giant was coming straight at Drizzt with a
I thought it
vengeance
was going to be
now,
bigger.
and Drizzt couldn't get the image of a flattened dark elf stretched from one end of the cavern to the other out of his mind. He reached for his scimitars, then realized the absurdity of that plan. Where would he hit the thing to slow it?
Because those
Throwing
other
his
ones I
weapon
showed
without
you
line,
in
Drizzt
inches,
spun on
those
his
would be.
heel and
Let
fled
me
after
actually
the
get
party
that.
burrowwood. The ground shook under Drizzt's feet so violently that he wondered if he might topple to the side and be blasted by the Baruchis. But then the tunnel entrance was just ahead, and Drizzt could see
Yeah,
a
because
smaller
that
side
one I
passage,
showed you with the
too
different
small
wheat
for the
plants
cover,
on it,
just outside the
that
Baruchi
one
camp.
is
He darted ahead the last few
12
strides, then
inches
cut swiftly into the
by
small tunnel,
16
diving into a roll
inches.
to break his momentum.
And then the other
Still, he
one
ricocheted hard off
is
the wall. Then the grubber slammed in behind, smashing at the tunnel entrance and dropping pieces of stone all about.
16 inches
When
by
the dust finally
28
cleared,
inches.
the grubber remained outside the passage, humming a
And
low,
that's what the other
growling
two
moan,
are.
and every so often banging its head against the stone. Belwar stood just a few feet farther in than Drizzt, the deep gnome's arms crossed over his chest, and a satisfied grin on his face. Peaceful enough? Drizzt asked him, rising to his feet and shaking off the dust.
They are indeed, replied Belwar with a nod. But grubbers do love their Baruchis and have no mind to share the things.
You almost got me crushed, Drizzt snarled at him. Again, Belwar nodded.
Mark it well, Dark Elf. For the next time you set your panther to sleep on me, I will surely do worse.
Drizzt fought hard to hide his smile. His heart pumped wildly under the influence of the adrenaline burst, but Drizzt held no anger toward his companion.
Okay, put this there.
Just a few months before,
Get my
when he was
stuff
out
ready to
alone
do a
in the
dab.
wilds. How different life would be with Belwar Gissenko by his side. How much more enjoyable. Drizzt glanced back to the angry and stubborn grubber. And how much more interesting.
Come along,
The smart Svirfneblin continued, starting off down the passage.
we are only making the grubber angrier by loitering in its sight.
The passageway narrowed and turned a sharp bend just a few feet farther in. Around the bend, the companions found even more trouble, for the corridor ended in a blank stone wall. Belwar moved right up to inspect it, and it was Drizzt's turn to cross his arms over his chest and gloat. You have put us in a dangerous spot, little friend, the drow said. An angry grubber behind, trapping us in a box corridor. Pressing his ear to the stone, Belwar waved Drizzt off with his hammer hand.
Merely an inconvenience.
The deep gnome assured him.
There is another tunnel beyond, not more than 7 feet.
7 feet of stone, Drizzt reminded him. But Belwar didn't seem concerned.
A day, he said, perhaps 2.
Belwar held his arms out wide and began a chant too low for Drizzt to hear clearly, though the drow realized that Belwar was engaged in some sort of spellcasting.
Bivrip!
Belwar cried. Nothing happened. The bird back on Drizzt and did not seem disappointed.
A day,
He proclaimed again. What did you do? Drizzt asked.
my hands are humming.
Replied the deep gnome. Seeing that Drizzt was completely at a loss, Belwar turned on his heel and slammed his hammer hand into the wall.
But another one that I have on its way is one I'm gonna be doing for my mom and aunt. At least when I get the money to do it, should I say?
Inches of rock into fine dust at his feet.
Maga Camera, Dark Elf.
Belwar cried with a wink.
You did not believe that my people would go to all the trouble of crafting such fine hands for me without puffing a bit of magic into them, did you?
Drizzt moved to the side of the passage and sat. You are full of surprises, little friend, he answered with a sigh of surrender.
I am indeed,
Belwar roared, and he pounded the stone again, sending flecks flying in every direction. They were out of the box corridor in a day, as Belwar had promised, and they set off again, traveling now by the deep gnome's estimation.
See if I can find on my watch list again.
Luck had followed them so far, and they both knew it, for they had spent 10 days in the wilds and had encountered nothing more hostile than a grubber protecting its baruchis.
It's...
Their luck
I can find it.
Some
Found
in
it,
the
but...
passage.
Belwar bade Drizzt as they crouched in the wide tunnel they had been traveling. Drizzt did not argue the wisdom of the Burrow Warden's request. He didn't like the green glow ahead any more than Belwar did. A moment later, the black mist swirled and then Guinevere stood beside them.
Yeah,
I
it's...
go first, Drizzt said. You both follow together, 20 steps behind.
It's 34 inches long and 16 inches wide, but it's and this is one I'm gonna give to my mom just because my mom and aunt are more religious than I am, but
dismissed his thoughts and moved away, letting his instincts and experience guide him. He found the glow to be emanating from a hole in the corridor floor. Beyond it, the corridor continued up bent sharply, nearly doubling back on itself. Drizzt fell to his belly and peered down the hall. Another passage about 10 feet below him ran perpendicular to the one he was in, opening a short way ahead into what appeared to be a large cavern.
What is it?
Belwar whispered, coming up behind. Another corridor to a chamber, Drizzt replied. The glow comes from there. He lifted his head and looked down into the ensuing darkness of a higher corridor.
Our tunnel continues.
Drizzt reasoned. We can go right by it. Belwar looked down the passageway they had been traveling, noting the turn.
Douglas Black,
He reasoned.
and one of the other ones I want to get is
side passage we passed an hour ago.
see if I can actually get a good picture of it.
He dropped to the dirt and looked into the hole.
There we go.
Such a glow, Drizzt asked, easily guessing that Belwar's curiosity was as keen as his own. Another form of moss?
None that I know.
Belwar replied. Shall we find out? Belwar smiled at him, then hooked his pick hand on the ledge and swung over and in, dropping down to the lower tunnel. Drizzt and Guinevere followed silently, the drow, scimitars in hand, again taking the lead as they moved toward the glow. They came into a wide and high chamber, its ceiling far beyond their sight, and a lake of green glowing, foul-smelling liquid, bubbling and hissing 20 feet below them. Dozens of interconnected narrow stone walkways, varying from 1 to 10 feet wide, crisscrossed the gorge, most ending in exits leading into more side corridors.
Let's do a dab of some runs.
Whispered the stone's earth nebula, and Drizzt shared that thought. It appears as though the floor was blasted away, Drizzt remarked, when he again found his voice.
Melted away.
Replied Belwar, guessing the liquid's nature. He hacked off a chunk of stone and, tapping Drizzt to get his attention, dropped it into the green lake. The liquid hissed as if in anger where the rock hit, eating away at the stone before it even sank from sight.
Acid.
Belwar explained. Drizzt looked at him curiously. He knew of acid from his days of training under the wizards of Sir Salem Near. Wizards often encountered such black elements for use in their magical experiments, but Drizzt did not figure that acid would appear naturally or in such quantities.
Some wizards working, I would guess. An experiment out of control. It has probably been here for 100 years, eating away at the floor, sinking down inch by inch.
What remains of the floor seems secure enough, observed Drizzt, pointing to the walkways. And we have a score of tunnels to choose from.
And let us begin at once, said Belwar. We're not like this place. We are exposed in the light, and I would not care to take quick flight along such narrow bridges, not with a lake of acid below.
Drizzt agreed and took a cautious step out on the walkway, but Guinevere quickly moved past him. Drizzt understood the Keeper's logic and wholeheartedly agreed. spring away, the section begins to fall. The Burrow Warden was not completely satisfied.
What if Guinevere does not make it to safety?
He asked, truly concerned.
What will the acid do to the little creature?
Drizzt wasn't certain of the answer. Guinevere should be safe, he reasoned, pulling the onyx figurine from his pocket. I hold the gateway to the Panther's home plane. Guinevere was a dozen feet away by then. The walkway seemed small enough, and Drizzt set out to follow.
Margot Camera, I pray you are right.
As he took the first several hundred feet across, even to the nearest exit. The companions neared the halfway point. Guinevere had already passed it when they stopped and glanced about, searching for the source. A weird-looking creature stepped out from one of the numerous side passages. It was bipedal and black-skinned, with a beaked bird's head and the torso of a man, featherless and wingless. Both of its powerful-looking arms ended in hooked, wicked claws, and its legs ended in three-toed feet. Another creature stepped out from behind it, and another from behind them.
Relatives?
Belvoir asked Drizzt, for the creatures did resemble some weird cross between a dark elf and a bird. Oh, Drizzt replied. In all of my life, I've never heard of such creatures.
Doom! Doom!
Came the continuing chant, and the friends looked around to see more of the birdmen stepping up from other passages. They were dire corbies, an ancient race more common to the southern reaches of the Underdark, though rare even there, and almost unknown in this part of the world. Corbies had never been of much concern to any of the Underdark races, for the birdmen's methods were crude and their numbers were small. To a passing band of adventurers, however, a flock of savage corbies meant trouble indeed.
Nor have I ever encountered such creatures. But I do not believe that they are pleased to see us.
There was a horrifying shriek. The soldiers began to disperse out onto the walkways, but occasionally breaking through, their anxiety obviously increasing. You are wrong, my little friend, Drizzt remarked. I believe that they are quite pleased to have their dinner delivered to them. Belvoir looked around helplessly. All of their escape routes were already cut off, and they couldn't hope to get out without a fight.
Dark Elf, I can think of 1,000 places I would rather do battle.
The Burrow Warden said, with a resigned shrug and a shudder as he took another look down into the acid lake. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, Belvoir began his ritual to enchant his magical hands. Let us get as close as we can before the fighting begins. A group of corbies closed rapidly at the party's side, but Guinevere, with a mighty spring that spanned 2 of the walkways, cut the birdmen off.
Beverett!
He cried, completing his attack, and turned toward the impending battle. Guinevere can take care of that group, Drizzt assured him, quickening his steps toward the nearest wall. Belvoir saw the Drow's reasoning. Still another group of enemies had come out of the exit they were making for. The momentum of Guinevere's leap carried the panther straight into the pack of corbies, bowling 2 of them right off the walkway. The birdmen shrieked horribly as they fell to their deaths, but their remaining companions seemed unbothered by the loss, drooling and chanting, "Doom! Doom!" They tore in at Guinevere with their sharp talons. The panther had formidable weapons of its own. Each swat of a great claw tore the life from a corby or sent it tumbling from the walkway to the acid lake. But while the cat continued to slash into the birdmen's ranks, the fearless corbies continued to fight back, and more rushed in eagerly to join. A second group came from the opposite direction and surrounded Guinevere. Belvoir set himself on a narrow section of the walkway and let the line of corbies come to him. Drizzt, taking a parallel route along a walkway 15 feet to his friend's side, did likewise, drawing his scimitar somewhat reluctantly. The Drow could feel the savage instincts of the hunter welling up within him as the battle drew near, and he fought back with all of his willpower to sublimate the wild urges. He was Drizzt Do'Urden, no more the hunter, and he would face his foes fully in control of his every movement. Then the Corbies were upon him, flailing away, shrieking their frenzied chants. Drizzt did little more than parry in those first seconds, the flats of his blades working marvelously to deflect each attempted strike. The scimitar spun and whirled, but the drow, refusing to loose the killer within him, made little headway in his fight. After several minutes, he still faced off against the first Corby that had come at him. Belwar was not so reserved. Corby after Corby rushed in at the little Svirfneblin, only to be pounded to a sudden halt by the Burrow Warden's explosive hammerhand. The electrical jolt and the sheer force of the blow often killed the Corby where it stood, but Belwar never waited long enough to find out. Following each hammer blow, the Deep Gnome's pickaxe hand came across in a roundhouse arc, sweeping the latest victim from the walkway. The Svirfneblin had dropped a half-dozen of the birdmen before he got the chance to look over at Drizzt. He recognized at once the inner struggle the drow was fighting.
Maga Camera! Belwar screamed. Fight them, Dark Elf, and fight to win! They will show no mercy! There can be no truce! Kill them! Cut them down, or surely they shall kill you!
Drizzt hardly heard Belwar's words. Tears rimmed his lavender eyes, though even in that blur, the almost magical rhythm of his weaving blades did not slow. He caught his opponent off balance and reversed the motion of a thrust, slamming the birdman in the head with the pommel of his scimitar. The Corby dropped like a stone. It would have fallen from the ledge, but Drizzt stepped across it and held it in place. Belwar shook his head and belted another adversary. The Corby hopped backward, its chest smoking and charred by the jarring impact of the enchanted hammerhand. The Corby looked at Belwar in blank disbelief, but uttered not a sound, nor made any move at all, as the pickaxe hooked in, catching it in the shoulder and launching it out over the acid lake. Guinevere flustered the hungry attackers. As the Corbies closed in on the panther's back, thinking the kill at hand, Guinevere crouched and sprang. The panther soared through the green light as though it had taken flight, landing on yet another of the walkways fully 30 feet away. Skidding on the smooth stone, Guinevere just managed to halt before toppling over the ledge into the acid pool. The Corbies glanced around in stunned amazement for just a moment, then took up their shrieks and wails and set off along the walkways in pursuit. A single Corby, near where Guinevere had landed, ran fearlessly to battle the cat. Guinevere's teeth found its neck in an instant and squeezed the life from it. But while the panther was so engaged, the Corby's devilish trap showed another twist. From far above in the high-ceilinged cavern, a Corby at last spotted its position. The birdman wrapped its arms around the heavy boulder on the ledge beside it and pushed out, dropping with the stone. At the last second, Guinevere saw the plummeting monster and scrambled out of its path. The Corby, in its suicidal ecstasy, didn't even care. The birdman slammed into the walkway, the momentum of the heavy boulder shattering the narrow bridge to pieces. The great panther tried to spring out again, but the stone underneath Guinevere's feet disintegrated before they could set in spring. Claws scratching futilely at the crumbling bridge, Guinevere followed the Corby and its boulder down into the acid lake. Hearing the elated shouts of the birdmen behind him, Belwar spun about just in time to see Guinevere's fall. Drizzt, too engaged at the time, for another Corby flailed away at him, and the one he had dropped was stirring back to consciousness between his feet, did not see. But the drow did not have to see. The figurine in Drizzt's pocket heated suddenly, wisps of smoke rising ominously from Drizzt's Bawakwi cloak. Drizzt could guess easily enough what had happened to his dear Guinevere. The drow's eyes narrowed, their sudden fire melting away his tears. He welcomed the hunter. Corbies fought with fury. The highest honor of their existence was to die in battle, and those closest to Drizzt Do'Urden soon realized that the moment of their highest honor was upon them. The drow thrust both his scimitars straight out, each finding an eye of the Corby facing him. The hunter pulled out the blades, spun them over in his hands, and plunged them down into the birdman at his feet. He snapped the scimitars up immediately and plunged them down again, taking grim satisfaction in the sound of their smooth cut. Then the drow dived headlong into the Corbies ahead of him, his blades cutting in from every possible angle. Hit a dozen times before it ever launched a single swing. The first Corby was quite dead before it even fell. Then the second, then the third. Drizzt backed them up to a wider section of the walkway. They came at him 3 at a time. They died at his feet 3 at a time.
Get them, Dark Elf!
mumbled Belwar, seeing his friend explode into action. The Corby, coming to meet the Burrow Warden, turned its head to see what had caught Belwar's attention. When it turned back, it was met squarely in the face by the Deep Gnome's hammer hand. Pieces of beak flew in every direction, and that unfortunate Corby was the first of its species to take flight in several millennium of evolution. Its short airborne excursion pushed its companions back from the Deep Gnome, and the Corby landed dead on its back many feet from Belwar. The enraged Deep Gnome wasn't finished with this one. He raced up, bowling from the walkway the single Corby who managed to get back to intercept him. When he arrived at last at his beakless victim, Belwar drove his pickaxe hand deep into its chest. With that single muscled arm, the Burrow Warden hoisted the dead Corby high into the air and let out a horrifying shriek of his own. The other Corbies hesitated. Belwar looked to Drizzt and was dismayed. A score of Corbies crowded in on the wide section of the walkway where the drow made his stand. Another dozen lay dead at Drizzt's feet, their blood running off the ledge and dripping into the acid lake in rhythmic hissing plops. But it wasn't the odds that Belwar feared. With his precise movements and measured thrusts, Drizzt was undeniably winning. High above the drow, though, another suicidal Corby and his pet rock took a dive. Belwar believed that Drizzt's life had come to a crashing end. But the hunter sensed the peril. A Corby reached for Drizzt. With a flash of the drow's scimitars, both its arms flew free of their respective shoulders. In the same dazzling movement, Drizzt snapped his bloodied scimitars into their sheaths and bolted for the edge of the platform. He reached the lip and leaped out toward Belwar, just as the suicidal boulder-riding Corby crashed down, taking the platform and a score of its kin with it into the acid pool. Belwar heaved his beakless trophy into the Corbies facing him and dropped to his knees, reaching out with his pickaxe hand to try to aid his soaring friend. Drizzt caught the Burrow Warden's hand and the ledge at the same time, slamming his face into the stone but finding a hold. The jolt ripped the drow's Powafwi, though, and Belwar watched helplessly as the onyx figurine rolled out and dropped toward the acid. Drizzt caught it between his feet. Belwar nearly laughed aloud at the futility and hopelessness of it all.
Hey, Soy, how you doing? Since you're here, let's do another dab.
Dark Elf, surely it has been fun, the Svirfneblin said resignedly to Drizzt. But the drow's response stole the levity from Belwar as surely as it stole the blood from the Deep Gnome's face.
Hope you're doing good, Soy.
Swing me, Drizzt growled so powerfully that Belwar obeyed before he even realized what he was doing. Drizzt rolled out and came swinging back toward the walkway, and when he bounced into the stone, every muscle in his body jerked violently to aid his momentum. He rolled right around the bottom of the walkway, scrambling and clawing with his arms and legs to gain a footing back up behind the crouching Deep Gnome. By the time Belwar realized what Drizzt had done and thought to turn around, Drizzt had his scimitars out and slicing across the face of the first approaching Corby. Hold this, Drizzt bade his friend, flicking the onyx figurine to Belwar with his toe. Belwar caught the item between his arms and fumbled it into a pocket. Then the Deep Gnome stood back and watched, taking up a rear guard as Drizzt cut a devastating path to the nearest exit. 5 minutes later, to Belwar's absolute amazement, they were running through down darkened tunnel. The frustrated shrieks of "Down! Down!" fast fading behind them. 18. A little place to call home. Enough! Enough! The winded Burrow Warden gasped at Drizzt, trying to slow his companion. Maga Camera, Dark Elf! We have been left behind! Drizzt spun on the Burrow Warden, scimitars ready in hand and angry fires burning still in his lavender eyes. Belwar backed away quickly and cautiously. Calm, my friend, Svirfneblin said quietly. But the Burrow Warden's muscles came defensively in front of him. The threat to us has ended. Drizzt breathed deeply to steady himself. Then, realizing that he had not put his scimitar, promptly slipped them into their sheaths. Are you all right? Drizzt's side.
That was some that.
Into the side of the walkway. Drizzt nodded.
Banana smack.
He tried vainly to explain. The excited. I had to let go. You need not explain. Belvoir cut him short.
And then the next one's going to
You
be
did fine, Dark Elf.
some
Better
ruts.
than fine. Had it not been for your actions, we, all three, surely would have fallen. It came back to me. It was searching for the words that could explain. I had thought it gone. It is, the Burrow Wolf said. No, that cruel beast that I have become possessed me fully against those birdmen. It guided my blades, savagely and without mercy. You guided your own blades, Belvoir assured him. But the rage, replied Drizzt, the unthinking rage. All I wanted to do was kill them and hack them down. If that was the truth, we would be there still, reasoned the Zwerfneblin. By your actions, we escaped. There are many more men back there to be killed. You led the way from the chamber. Rage? Perhaps. But surely not unthinking rage. You did as you had to do, and you did it well, Dark Elf, better than anyone I have ever seen. Do not apologize to me or to yourself. Drizzt leaned back against the wall to consider the words. He was comforted by the deep gnome's reasoning.
Oh, sativa.
Belwar's efforts. Still,
I can't do sativas too late at night because I have trouble sleeping to begin with. If I do a sativa, I'm really going to be up. Let's do one of some runs. Well, most of what I smoke is usually indica, or if it's a hybrid. Excuse me. If it's a hybrid, it's usually a indica dominant hybrid.
Had come to the fore and guided the deadly strikes of his blades. There was a difference that Drizzt couldn't deny. Before, when he was alone, the hunter did not so readily depart. Now, with Belvoir by his side, Drizzt was fully back in control. Drizzt shook his thick white mane, trying to disperse.
Oh, I like them all too. But for me, the sativa is more of a daytime one for me. You use this one this time.
The statuette, you have it. Marga Camera, his round toned voice edged with power. Might the panther be wounded? What effect would the
Because the one I used earlier was this one.
Might the panther have escaped to the astral plane? Drizzt took the figurine and examined it in trembling hands, taking comfort in the fact that it was not in any way. Drizzt believed that he should wait before calling Guinevere. If the panther was injured, it would surely heal better at rest in its own plane of existence. But Drizzt could not wait to learn of Guinevere's fate. He placed the figurine down on the ground at his feet and called out softly.
I like him. These make my wax last a little longer.
The mist began to swirl around the onyx statue. Belvoir took out his enchanted brooch to better observe the cat. A dreadful sight awaited them. But as soon as the drow saw it, he knew they should have left Guinevere so that it might lick its wounds.
And I've gotten the what you call it,
once sleek muscles hung ragged,
the temp dial down on it too, to where I can get it just right, at least for the most part.
Trying to get to Drizzt's side, Drizzt rushed to Guinevere instead, dropping to his knees and throwing a gentle hug around the panther's huge neck. Gwen, he mumbled. Will it heal? Belvoir asked softly, his voice nearly breaking apart on every word. Drizzt shook his head at a loss.
I
He knew very little about the panther beyond its abilities.
I'm cheap too. Well, I don't like to spend that much money. But when I do have my wax, that's why I use these. just because it makes my wax last longer. And these are, at least this one, it cost me $25. Oh, don't get me wrong, I still smoke smoke a bowl, but don't get me wrong on that. I guess I just like the wax because it gets you there quicker, and then you can just smoke a bowl after that.
Picked it up and studied it for a very long time before he could bear to drop it back into a pocket.
That's how I am most of the time. The only time I have stuff like that is near the first, because that's when I get my check in, and the extra money I have from paying everything I owe and with bills and all that shit, I'm usually left with a limited amount, so I tend to splurge and buy me some wax that I try to stretch it out as far as possible.
And the necessity of thought, of tapping into the being that Zachnafane had been on more than an instinctive level, brought the inevitable conflict between this undead animation and the spirit of the being it held captive. Back in her anteroom, Matron Malice Do'Urden felt the struggle within her creation. In Zimkarla, control of the spirit wraith remained the responsibility of the matron mother that the Spider Queen graced with the gift. Malice had to work hard at the appointed task, and to spit off a succession of chants and spells to insinuate herself between the thought processes of the spirit wraith and the emotions and soul of Zachnafane Do'Urden. The spirit wraith lurched as he felt the intrusions of Malice's powerful will. It proved to be no contest. In barely a second, the spirit wraith was studying the small chamber Drizzt and one other being, probably a deep gnome, had disguised as a campsite. They were gone now, 10 days out, and no doubt moving away from Blingdenstone with all speed. Probably, the spirit wraith reasoned, moving away from Menzo Baronzon as well. Zachnafane moved outside the chamber into the main tunnel. He sniffed one way, back east toward Menzo Baronzon, then turned and dropped to a crouch and sniffed again. The location spells Malice had imbued upon Zachnafane could not cover such distances, but the minute sensations that Spirit Wraith received from his inspection only confirmed his suspicions. Drizzt had gone west. Zachnafane walked off down the tunnel, not the slightest limp evident from the wound he had received at the end of a goblin spear, a wound that would have crippled a mortal being. He was more than a 10-day behind Drizzt, maybe 2, but the spirit wraith was not concerned. His prey had to sleep, had to rest and eat. His prey was flesh and mortal, and weak. What manner of being is it? Drizzt whispered to Belwar as they watched the curious body filling buckets in a fast-running stream. This entire area of the tunnels was magically lighted, but Drizzt and Belwar felt safe enough in the shadows of a rocky outcrop, a few dozen yards from the stooping robed figure.
A man, Belwar replied. Human from the surface.
Oh, is it? I know. It's just waiting on my system right now.
It goes against the teachings I received in the academy.
Probably a wizard, Belwar reasoned. That would account for the light in this region, and it would account for his being here.
Drizzt looked at the Svirfneblin curiously.
A strange lot are wizards,
Belwar explained, as though the truth was self-evident.
Human wizards, even more than any others, so I've heard tell. Drow wizards practice for power. Svirfneblin wizards practice the arts to better know the stone. But human wizards,
The deep gnome went on, obvious disdain in his tone.
Maga Canova, Dark Elf. Human wizards are a different lot altogether.
Why do human wizards practice the art of magic at all? Drizzt asked. Belwar shook his head.
I do not believe that any scholars have yet discovered the reason, he replied in all sincerity. A strange and dangerously unpredictable race are the humans, and better to be left alone. You have met some? A few.
Oh shit. Was it on both systems?
He was not a pleasant one. Traitors from the surface, ugly things and arrogant. The whole of the world is only for them by their thinking.
The resonant voice rang out a bit more loudly than Belwar had intended, and the robed figure by the stream cocked his head in the companion's direction. "Coming out, little rodents," the human called, in a language that the companions could not understand. The wizard reiterated the request in another tongue, then in Drow, and then in two more unknown tongues, and then in Zwerfnebla.
No shit.
He continued on for many minutes, Drizzt and Belwar looking at each other in disbelief. "He is a learned man," Drizzt whispered to the deep elf. "Rats, probably," the human muttered to himself. He glanced around, seeking some way to flush out the unseen noisemakers, thinking that the creatures might provide a fine meal. "Let us learn if he is friend or foe," Drizzt whispered, and he started to move out from the concealment. Belwar stopped him and looked at him doubtfully, but then, with no recourse other than his own instincts, he shrugged and let Drizzt move on. "Greetings, humans so far from home," Drizzt said in his native language, stepping out from behind the outcropping. The human's eyes went hysterically wide, and he pulled roughly on his scraggly white beard. "You is not in a rat!" he shrieked in strained but understandable Drow. "No," Drizzt said. He looked back to Belwar, who was moving out to join him. "Thieves!" the human cried. "Coming to steal my home, ist you?" "No," Drizzt said again. "Go away!" the human yelled, waving his hands as a farmer would to shoot chickens. "Get 'em! Go on, quickly now!" Drizzt and Belwar exchanged curious glances. "No," Drizzt said a third time. "This is my home, stupid dark elven," the human spat. "Did I ask you to come in here? Did I send a letter inviting you to join me in my home? Or perhaps you and your oogly little friend simply consider it your duty to welcome me to the neighborhood?"
"Careful, Drow," Belwar whispered as the human rambled on. "He's a wizard for sure, and a shaky one even by human standards."
"Or it may be but the Drow and deep gnome races fear of me," the human mused, more to himself than to the intruders. "Yes, of course. They have heard that I, Brister Fendelstick, decided to take to the corridors of the Underdark and have joined forces to protect themselves against me. Yes, yes, it all seems so clear and so pitiful to me now."
"I have fought wizards before," Drizzt replied to Belwar under his breath. "Let us hope that we can settle this without blows. Whatever must happen, though, know that I have no desire to return the way we came." Belwar nodded his grim agreement as Drizzt turned back to the human. "Perhaps we can convince him simply to let us pass," Drizzt whispered. The human trembled on the verge of an explosion.
"Fine!" he screamed suddenly. "Then do not get in the way!" Drizzt saw his error in thinking that he might reason with this one. The Drow started forward, meaning to close in before the wizard could launch any attacks. But the human had learned to survive in the Underdark, and his defenses were in place long before Drizzt and Belwar ever appeared around the rocky outcropping. He waved his hands and uttered a single word that the companions could not understand. A ring on his finger glowed brightly and loosed a tiny ball of fire up into the air between him and the intruders. "Welcome to my home, then!" the wizard yelled triumphantly. "Play with this!" He snapped his fingers and vanished. Drizzt and Belwar could feel the explosive energy gathering around the glowing orb. "Run!" the Burrow Warden cried, and he turned to flee. In Blingdenstone, most of the magic was illusionary, designed for defense. But in Menzoberranzan, where Drizzt had learned of magic, the spells were undeniably offensive. Drizzt knew the wizard's attack, and he knew that in these narrow and low corridors, flight would not be an option. "No!" he cried, and he grabbed the back of Belwar's leather jack and pulled the deep gnome along, straight toward the glowing orb. Belwar knew to trust in Drizzt, and he turned and ran willingly beside his friend. The Burrow Warden understood the Drow's plan as soon as his eyes managed to tear away from the spectacle of the orb. Drizzt was making for the stream. The friends dived headlong into the water, bouncing and scraping on the stones just as the fireball exploded. A moment later, they rose up from the steaming water, wisps of smoke rising from the back of their clothing, which had not been submerged. They coughed and sputtered, for the flames had temporarily stolen the air from the chamber, and the residual heat from the glowing stones nearly overwhelmed them.
"Humans,"
Belwar muttered grimly. He pulled himself from the water and shook vigorously. Drizzt came out beside him and couldn't hide his laughter. The deep gnome, though, found no levity at all in the situation.
"The wizard,"
he pointedly reminded Drizzt. And Drizzt dropped into a crouch and glanced nervously all around. They set off at once.
"Home!"
Belwar proclaimed a couple of days later. The two friends looked down from a narrow ledge at a wide and high cavern that housed an underground lake. Behind them was a three-chambered cave with only a single tiny entrance, easily defensible. Drizzt climbed the 10 or so feet to stand by his friend on the topmost ledge. "Possibly," he tentatively agreed. "But we left the wizard only a few days' walk from here."
"Forget the human,"
Belwar snarled, glancing over at the burn mark on his precious jack. "And I am not so fond of having so large a pool only a few feet from our door," Drizzt continued.
"With fish it is filled," the Burrow Warden argued, "and with mosses and plants that will keep our bellies full, and water that seems clean enough."
"But such an oasis will attract visitors," reasoned Drizzt. "We would find little rest, I fear." Belwar looked down the sheer wall to the floor of the large cavern.
"Never a problem,"
he said with a snicker.
"The bigger ones cannot get up here, and the smaller ones? Well, I have seen the cuts of your blades, and you have seen the strength of my hands. About the smaller ones I shall not worry."
Drizzt liked the Zwerfneplin's confidence, and he had to agree that they had found no other place suitable for use as a dwelling. Water, hard to find and more often than not undrinkable, was a precious commodity in the dry Underdark. With the lake and the growth about it, Drizzt and Belwar would never have to travel far to find a meal. Drizzt was about to agree, but then a movement down by the water caught his and Belwar's attention.
"And crabs!"
spouted the Zwerfneplin, obviously not having the same reaction to the sight as the Drow.
"Maga Camera, Dark Elf! Crabs! As fine a meal as ever you will find!"
Indeed, it was a crab that had slipped out of the lake. A gigantic, 12-foot monster with pincers that could snap a human, or an elf or a gnome, fully in half. Drizzt looked at Belwar incredulously. "A meal?" he asked. Belwar's smile rolled right up around his crinkled nose as he banged his hammer and pick hands together. They ate crab meat that night, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. And Drizzt soon was quite willing to agree that the three-chambered cave by the underground lake made a fine home. The spirit wraith paused to consider the red-glowing field. In life, Zaknafein de Wern would have avoided such a patch, respecting the inherent dangers of odd-glowing rooms and luminous mosses. But to the spirit wraith the trail was clear. Drizzt had come this way. The spirit wraith waded in, ignoring the noxious puffs of deadly spores that shot up at him with every step, choking spores that filled the lungs of unfortunate creatures. But Zaknafein did not draw breath. Then came the rumbling as the grubber rushed to protect its domain. Zaknafein fell into a defensive crouch, the instincts of the being he once had been sensing the danger. The grubber rolled into the glowing moss patch, but noticed no intruder to chase away. It moved in anyway, thinking that a meal of baruchis might not be such a bad thing. When the grubber reached the center of the chamber, the spirit wraith let his levitation spell dissipate. Zacnophane landed on the monster's back, locking his legs fast. The grubber thrashed and thundered about the room, but Zacnophane's balance did not waver. The grubber's hide was thick and tough, able to repel all but the finest of weapons, which Zacnophane possessed.
What was that?
Belwar asked one day, stopping his work on a new door, blocking their cave opening. Down by the pool, Drizzt apparently had heard the sound as well, for he had dropped the helmet he was using to fetch some water, and had drawn both scimitars. He held a hand up to keep the burrow warden silent, then picked his way back to the ledge for a quiet conversation. The sound, a loud clacking noise, came again.
You know it, Dark Elf?
Belwar asked softly. Drizzt nodded. Hookars, he replied, possessing the keenest hearing in all the Underdark. Drizzt kept his recollections of his sole encounter with this type of monster to himself. It had occurred during a patrol exercise, with Drizzt leading his academy class through the tunnels outside Benzobaronzon. The patrol came upon a group of the giant bipedal creatures with exoskeletons as hard as plated metal armor and powerful beaks and claws. The Drow patrol, mostly through Drizzt's exploits, had won the day, but what Drizzt remembered most keenly was his belief that the encounter had been an exercise planned by the masters of the academy, and that they had sacrificed an innocent Drow child to the Hookars for the sake of realism. Let us find them, Drizzt said quietly but grimly. Belwar paused to catch his breath when he saw the dangerous simmer in the Drow's lavender eyes. Hookars are dangerous rivals, Drizzt explained, noticing the deep gnome's hesitation. We cannot allow them to roam the region. Following the clacking noises, Drizzt had little trouble closing in. He silently picked his way around a final bend with Belwar close by his side. In a wider section of the corridor stood a single Hookar, banging its heavy claws rhythmically against the stone, as a Svirfneblin miner might use his pickaxe. Drizzt held Belwar back, indicating that he could dispatch the monster quickly if he could sneak in on it without being noticed. Belwar agreed, but remained poised to join in at the first opportunity or need. The Hookar, obviously engaged in its game with the stone wall, did not hear or see the approaching stealthy Drow. Drizzt came right in beside the monster, looking for the easiest and fastest way to dispatch it. He saw only one opening in the exoskeleton, a slit between the creature's breastplate and its wide neck. Getting a blade in there could be a bit of a problem, though, for the Hookar was nearly 10 feet tall. But the hunter found the solution. He came in hard and fast at the Hookar's knee, butting with both his shoulders and bringing his blades up into the creature's crotch. The Hookar's legs buckled, and it tumbled back over the Drow. As agile as any cat, Drizzt rolled out and sprang on top of the felled monster, both his blades coming tip-in at the slit in the armor. He could have
Yeah,
finished
I'm a
the
little
Hookar
distracted. I'm
with ease.
playing
His
a
scimitars
game right
easily
now.
could have slipped through the bony defenses.
Paying
Drizzt saw
attention to the chat and playing the game.
on the Hookar's face, something in the creature's expression that should not have been there. He forced the hunter back inside, took control of his swords, and hesitated for just a second. Long enough for the Hookar, to Drizzt's absolute amazement, to speak in clear and proper Drow language. Please do not kill me. 14. Clacker. The scimitars slowly eased away from the Hookar's neck.
Not as I appear,
the monster tried to explain in its halting speech.
Hell yeah.
With each uttered word, the Hookar seemed to become more comfortable with the language.
I am Petch.
Petch? Belwar gawked, moving up to Drizzt side. The Svirfneblin looked down at the trapped monster with understandable confusion.
A bit big you are for a Petch,
he remarked. Drizzt looked from the monster to Belwar, seeking
got
some
this
explanation. The drow had
the other day.
Rock children.
Just don't have no games for it, so I'm playing around with
Strange little creatures. Hard
the
as the
free
stone
one.
and living for no other reason than to work it.
Sounds like a Svirfneblin, Drizzt replied. Belwar paused a moment to figure out if he had been complimented or insulted. Unable to discern, the Burrow Warden continued somewhat cautiously.
There are not many Petch about, and fewer still that look like this one.
He cast a doubting eye at the Hookar, then gave Drizzt a look that told the drow to keep his scimitars at the ready.
Petch? No. More.
The Hookar stammered.
Was it a Yu-Gi-Oh?
Evident in its throaty voice.
It's a free one for the
Petch.
Switch until I could get a.
What is your name? Drizzt asked.
It's a card game, so it reminds me of Magic the Gathering.
The Hookar thought for a moment, then shook its great head helplessly.
Petch? No more.
The monster said again, and it purposely tilted its beaked face backward, widening the crack in its exoskeleton armor and inviting Drizzt to finish the strike. You cannot remember your name? Drizzt asked, not so anxious to kill the creature. The Hookar neither moved nor replied. Drizzt looked to Belwar.
It's one of those dual link ones or game.
What happened? Drizzt pressed the monster. You must tell me what happened to you.
What?
The Hookar struggled to reply.
Wizard. Evil. Wizard.
Somewhat schooled in the ways of magic, and in the unscrupulous uses its practitioners often put it to, Drizzt began to understand the possibilities and began to believe this strange creature.
I hit mine up earlier this evening, and
amazed expressions. I have heard of such spells.
As have I.
I hit him up to see if he had any games I could borrow.
I have seen the wizards of Blingdenstone use similar magic when we needed to infiltrate.
The deep gnome paused suddenly, remembering the heritage of the elf he was addressing. Mezzo-Baron's honor, Drizzt finished with a chuckle. Belwar cleared his throat, a bit embarrassed, and turned back to the monster.
A Petch you once were,
he said, needing to hear the whole explanation spelled out in one clear thought.
And some wizard changed you into a Hookar. True,
the monster replied.
Petch no more. Where are your companions?
The Svirfneblin asked.
I can take it from here if I'm running around or got something to do. I can just take those off and put it on the other part of it,
said the monster.
Evil.
Human wizard.
The Switch has a limited.
Yes, man. And the wizard then left you to your pains as a Hookar.
It has limited games you can play for free.
He and Drizzt looked long and hard at each other, and then the drow stepped away, allowing the Hookar to rise.
I wish you would kill me,
the monster then said, twisting up into a sitting position. It looked at its clawed hands with obvious disgust.
The stone lost to me.
Belwar raised his own crafted hands in response.
So had I once believed, he said. You are alive, and no longer are you alone. Come with us to the lake, where we can talk some more.
Presently the hook horror agreed and began, with much effort, to raise its quarter-ton bulk from the floor.
Oh, you fucking...
Amid the scraping and shuffling of the creature's hard exoskeleton, Belwar prudently whispered to Drizzt,
"Keep your blades at the ready."
The hook horror finally stood, towering to its imposing 10-foot height, and the drow did not argue Belwar's logic. For many hours, the hook horror recounted its adventures to the two friends. As amazing as the story was the monster's growing acclamation to the use of language. This fact, and the monster's descriptions of its previous existence, of a life tapping and shaping the stone in an almost holy reverence, further convinced Belwar and Drizzt of the truth of its bizarre tale.
"It feels
Hell yeah. Yeah, as long as he does his job.
good to speak again, though the language is not my own,"
the creature said after a while.
"It feels as if I have found again a part of what I once was."
With his own similar experiences so clear in his mind, Drizzt understood the sentiments completely.
"How long have you been this way?"
Belwar asked. The hook horror shrugged, its huge chest and shoulders rattling through the movement.
10 days, months,
it said.
"I cannot remember. The time is lost to me."
Drizzt put his face in his hands and exhaled a deep sigh, in full empathy and sympathy with the unfortunate creature. Drizzt, too, had felt so lost and alone out in the wilds. He, too, knew the grim truth of such a fate. Belwar patted the drow softly with his hammer hand.
"And where now are you going?"
the burrow warden asked the hook horror.
My friend said that he might have Assassin's Creed game for it.
The hook horror replied, fumbling helplessly over that last word, as though the mere mention of the evil wizard pained the creature greatly.
"But so much is lost to me. I would find him with little effort if I was still patch. The stones would tell me where to look, but I cannot talk to them very often anymore."
The monster rose from its seat on the stone.
"I will go,"
it said determinedly.
"You are not safe with me around."
"You will stay," Drizzt said suddenly, and with a tone of finality that could not be denied.
"I cannot control,"
the hook horror tried to explain.
"You've no need to worry,"
said Belwar. He pointed to the doorway up on the ledge at the side of the cavern.
"Our home is up there, with a door too small for you to get through. Down here by the lake, you must rest until we all decide our best course of action."
The hook horror was exhausted, and the Svirfnebling's reasoning seemed sound enough. The monster dropped heavily back to the stone and curled up as much as its bulky body would allow. Drizzt and Belwar took their leave, glancing back at their strange new companion with every step.
"Klecker,"
Belwar said suddenly, stopping Drizzt beside him. With great effort, the hook horror rolled over to consider the deep note, understanding that Belwar had uttered the word in its
Oh no.
"That is what we shall call you if you have no objections,"
the Svirfneblin explained to the creature and to Drizzt.
"Klecker."
"A fitting name," Drizzt remarked.
"It is a good name,"
agreed the hook horror, but silently. The creature
It's
wished that it could remain
somewhat easy to pick up,
a name that rolled on and on like
but
a rounded
it's
boulder
card-based,
in a sloping
so
passage, and spoke prayers to the stone with each growling syllable. We will widen the door.
a lot to learn on it just because of different cards and whatnot.
So that Klecker may enter and rest beside us in safety.
"No, Dark Elf,"
argued the burrow warden.
"that we shall not do."
It is not safe out there beside the water, Drizzt replied. Monsters will find him.
Safe enough he is,
snorted Belwar.
What monster would willingly attack a Hookar?
Belwar understood Drizzt's sincere concern, but he understood, too, the danger in Drizzt's suggestion.
I have witnessed such spells,
the Svirfneblin said somberly.
They are called polymorph. Immediately comes the change of the body, but the change of the mind can take time.
What are you saying? Drizzt's voice edged on panic.
Clacker is still a Petch,
replied Belwar.
Trapped though he is in the body of a Hookar. But soon, I fear, Clacker will be a Petch no more. A Hookar he will become mind and body.
Yeah, the game's not too bad to pass time. The main reason I'm playing it is just because I ain't got nothing else to play. At least on this, my PS5's in the living room, but I'm in my room.
Not as much as you believe. So you believe, but that which was essentially Drizzt Do'Urden remained within you, my friend. You were as you had to be, as the situation around you forced to be. This is different. Not just in body, but in very essence will Clacker become a Hookar. His thoughts will be the thoughts of a Hookar, and Maga Camera, he will not return your grant of mercy when you are around.
Drizzt could not be satisfied, though he could not refute the deep-nosed blunt logic. He moved into the complex's left-hand chamber, the one he had claimed as his bedroom, and fell into his hammock.
Alas for you, Drizzt Do'Urden.
Yep. Safety meeting.
And alas for our doomed Petch friend.
And crawled into his hammock, feeling terrible about the whole situation, but determined to remain coldly logical and practical, whatever the pain. For Belwar understood that Drizzt felt a kinship to the unfortunate creature, a potentially fatal bond founded in empathy for Clacker's loss of self. Later that night, an excited Drizzt shook the Svirfneblin from his slumber. We must help him, Drizzt whispered harshly. Belwar wiped an arm across his face and tried to orient himself. His sleep had been uneasy, filled with dreams in which he over it in an impossibly loud voice. Then he proceeded to bash the life out of his newest companion. We must help him, Drizzt said again, even more forcefully. Belwar could tell by the drow's haggard appearance that Drizzt had found no sleep this night.
I am no wizard, the Burrow Warden said. Neither are.
And we will find one, Drizzt growled. We will find the human who cursed Clacker and force him to reverse the Dweomer. We saw him by the stream only a few days ago. He cannot be so far away.
A mage capable of such magic will prove no easy foe, Belwar was quick to reply. Have you so quickly forgotten the fireball?
Belwar laughed. As if to convince himself.
The wizard is beyond us, I fear,
Belwar mumbled. But Drizzt could see the lack of conviction in the Burrow Warden's expression as he spoke the words. Are you so quick to condemn Clacker? Drizzt asked bluntly. A wide smile began to spread over Drizzt's face as he saw the Svirfneblin weakening. Is this the same Belwar Dizengob who took in a lost drow? The most honored Burrow Warden who would not give up hope for a dark elf that everyone else considered dangerous and beyond help?
Go to sleep, dark elf,
Belwar retorted, pushing Drizzt away with his hammer hand. Wise advice, my friend, said Drizzt. And you sleep well. We may have a long road ahead of us.
Maga Camera,
puffed the taciturn Svirfneblin, stubbornly holding to his facade of gruff practicality. He rolled away from Drizzt and soon was snoring. Drizzt noted that Belwar's snores now sounded from the depths depths of a deep and contented sleep. Clacker beat against the wall with his hands, tapping the stone relentlessly.
Not again, the flustered Belwar whispered to Drizzt. Not out here.
Drizzt sped along the winding corridor, homing in on the monotonous sound. Clacker, he called softly when the hook horror was in sight. The hook horror turned to face the approaching drow, clawed hands wide and ready, and a growing hiss slipping through its great beak. A moment later, Clacker realized what he was doing and abruptly stopped. Why must you continue that banging? Drizzt asked, trying to pretend, even to himself, that he had not seen Clacker's battle stance. We're out in the wilds, my friend. Such sounds invite visitors. The giant monster's head drooped.
You should not have come out with me, Clacker said. I cannot. Too many things will happen that I can't control.
Drizzt reached up and put a comforting hand on Clacker's bony elbow. It was my fault, the drow said, understanding the hook horror's meaning. Clacker had apologized for turning dangerously on Drizzt. We should not have gone off in different directions, Drizzt continued, and I should not have approached you so quickly and without warning. We will all stay together now, though our search may prove longer, and Belwar and I will help you to maintain control. Clacker's beaked face brightened.
It does feel so very good to tap the stone.
Proclaimed. Clacker banged a claw on the rock as if to jolt his memory. His voice and his gaze trailed away as he thought of his past life, the one that the wizard had stolen from him. All the Petch's days had been spent tapping the stone, shaping the stone, talking to the precious stone. He will be Petch again, Drizzt promised. Belwar, approaching from the tunnel, heard the drow's words and was not so certain. They had been out in the tunnels for more than a 10-day and had found not a sign of the wizard. But Burrow Warden took some comfort in the fact that Clacker seemed to be winning back part of himself from his monstrous state, seemed to be regaining a measure of his Petch personality. Belwar had watched the same transformation in Drizzt just a few 10 days before, and beneath the survivalistic barriers of the hunter that Drizzt had become, Belwar had discovered his closest friend. But the Burrow Warden took care not to assume the same results with Clacker. The hook horror's condition was the result of powerful magic, and no amount of friendship could reverse the workings of the wizard's Dweomer. In finding Drizzt and Belwar, Clacker had been granted a temporary, and only temporary, reprieve from a miserable and undeniable fate. They moved on through the tunnels of the Underdark for several more days without any luck. Clacker's personality still did not deteriorate, but even Drizzt, who had left the cave complex beside the lake so full of hope, began to feel the weight of increasing reality. Then, just as Drizzt and Belwar had begun discussing returning to their home, the group came into a fair-sized cavern littered with rubble from a recent collapse of the ceiling.
He has been here,
Clacker cried, and he offhandedly lifted a huge boulder and tossed it against the distant wall, where it shattered into so much rubble.
He has been here!
The hook horror rushed about, smashing stone and throwing boulders with growing explosive rage.
How can you know?
Belwar demanded, trying to stop his giant friend's tirade. Clacker pointed up at the ceiling.
He did this. He did this!
Drizzt and Belwar exchanged concerned glances. The chamber's ceiling, which had been about 15 feet up, was gouged and blasted, and in its center loomed a massive hole that extended up to twice the ceiling's former height. If magic had caused that devastation, it was powerful magic indeed.
The wizard did this?
Belwar echoed. He cast that stubbornly practical look he had perfected toward Drizzt one more time.
his tower,
Clacker replied, and rushed off about the chamber to see if he could discern which exit the wizard had taken. Now Drizzt and Belwar were completely at a loss, and Clacker, when he finally took the time to look at them, realized their confusion.
The wizard,
Belwar put in impatiently. Clacker took no offense, even appreciated the assistance.
The wizard has a tower,
the excited Hookhara tried to explain.
A great iron tower that he takes with him, setting it up wherever it is convenient.
Clacker looked up at the ruined ceiling.
Even if it does not always fit. He carries a tower?
Belwar asked, his long nose crinkling right up over itself. Clacker nodded excitedly, but then didn't take the time to explain further, for he had found the wizard's trail, a clear boot print in a bed of moss leading down another of the corridors. Drizzt and Belwar had to be satisfied with their friend's incomplete explanation, for the chase was on. Drizzt took up the lead, using all the skills he had learned in the Drow Academy and had heightened during his decade alone in the Underdark. Belwar, with his innate racial understanding of the Underdark and his magically lighted brooch, kept track of their direction, and Clacker, in those instances when he fell more completely back into his former self, asked the stones for guidance.
I don't know why you come saying that stuff to me, but okay.
And another chamber that showed clear signs of a tower's presence, though its ceiling was high
each
to
its own,
accommodate the
but
structure.
don't come over here
A
preaching.
few days later, the three companions turned into a wide and high cavern, and far back from them, beside a rushing stream, loomed the wizard's home. Again, Drizzt and Belwar looked at each other helplessly, for the tower stood fully 30 feet high and 20 across, its smooth metallic walls mocking their plans. They took separate and cautious routes to the structure, and were even more amazed, for the tower's walls were pure adamantite, the hardest metal in all the world. They found only a single door, small and barely showing its outline in the perfection of the tower's craftsmanship. They didn't have to test it to know that it was secure against unwelcome visitors.
He's in there.
Clacker snarled, running his claws over the door in desperation.
And he will have to come out,
Drizzt reasoned. And when he does, we will be waiting for him. The plan did not satisfy the Patcher. With a rumbling roar that echoed throughout the region, Clacker threw his huge body against the tower door, then jumped back and slammed it again. The door didn't even shudder under the pounding, and it quickly became obvious to the deep gnome and the drow that Clacker's body would certainly lose the battle. Drizzt tried vainly to calm his giant friend, while Belwar moved off to the side and began a familiar chant. Finally, Clacker tumbled down in a heap, sobbing in exhaustion and pain and a helpless rage.
Down.
And Belwar,
Yeah.
his neutral hands sparkling.
It was a pretty big update. I remember that.
Move aside, the Burrow Warden demanded. I have come too far to be stopped by a single door.
Belwar moved directly in front of the small door and slammed his enchanted hammer hand at it with all his strength. A blinding flash of blue sparks burst out in every direction.
I'll be right back.
His muscled arms worked furiously, scraping and bashing. But when Belwar had exhausted his energy, the tower door showed only the slightest of scratches and superficial burns. Belwar banged his hands together in disgust, showering himself in harmless sparks, and Clacker agreed wholeheartedly with his frustrated sentiments. Drizzt, though, was more angry and concerned than his friends. Not only had the wizard's tower stopped them, but the wizard inside undoubtedly knew of their presence. Drizzt moved about the structure cautiously, noting the many arrow slits. Creeping below one, he heard a soft chant, and though he couldn't understand the wizard's words, he could guess easily enough the human's intent. "Run!" he yelled to his companions, and then, in sheer desperation, he grabbed a nearby stone and hauled it up into the opening of the arrow slit. Luck was with the drow, for the wizard completed his spell just as the rock slammed against the opening. A lightning bolt roared out, shattered the stone, and sent Drizzt flying, but it reflected back into the tower. "Damnation! Damnation!" came came a squeal from inside the tower. "I hate when that happens!" Belwar and Clacker rushed over to help their fallen friend. The drow was only stunned, and he was up and ready before they ever got there. "Oh, you is going to pay dearly for that one. Yes, you is!" came a cry from within.
"Run away!" cried the burrow warden,
And even the outraged Hookar was in full agreement. But as soon as Belwar looked into the drow's lavender eyes, he knew that Drizzt would not flee. Clacker, too, backed away a step from the fires gathering within Drizzt Do'Urden.
"Marga Canner, a dark elf. We cannot get in,"
the Svirfneblin prudently reminded Drizzt. Drizzt pulled out the onyx figurine and held it against the arrow slit, blocking it with his body. "We shall see," he growled, and then he called to Guinevere. A black mist swirled about and found only one empty path clear from the figurine. "I will kill you all!" cried the unseen wizard. The next sound from within the tower was a low panther's growl, and then the wizard's voice rang out again. "I could be wrong!"
"Open the door," Drizzt screamed. "On your life, foul wizard!"
"Never!" Guinevere roared again. Then the wizard screamed, and the door swung wide. Drizzt led the way. They entered a circular room, the tower's bottom level. An iron ladder ran up its center to a trap door, the wizard's attempted escape route. The human hadn't quite made it, however, and he hung upside down off the backside of the ladder, one leg hooked at the knee through a rung. Guinevere, appearing fully healed from the ordeal in the acid lake, and looking again like the most magnificent of panthers, perched on the other side of the ladder, casually mouthing the wizard's calf and foot. "Do come in!" the wizard cried, throwing his arms out wide, then drawing them back to pull his drooping robe up from his face. Wisps of smoke rose from the remaining tatters of the lightning-blackened robe. "I am Brister Fendelstick. Welcome to my humble home." Belwar kept Clacker at the door, holding his dangerous friend back with his hammer hand, while Drizzt moved up to take charge of the prisoner. The drow paused long enough to regard his dear feline companion, for he hadn't summoned Guinevere since that day when he had sent the panther away to heal. "You speak drow," Drizzt remarked, grabbing the wizard by the collar and agilely spinning him down to his feet. Drizzt eyed the man suspiciously. He had never seen a human before the encounter in the corridor by the stream. To this point, the drow wasn't overly impressed. "Many tongues is known to me," replied the wizard, brushing himself off, and then, as if his proclamation was meant to carry some great importance, he added, "I am Brister Fendelstick."
"Do you name Petch among your languages?"
Belwar growled from the door. "Petch?" the wizard replied, spitting the word with apparent distaste. "Petch," Drizzt snarled, emphasizing his response by snapping the edge of a scimitar to within an inch of the wizard's neck. Clacker took a step forward, easily sliding the blocking Svirfneblin across the smooth floor. "My large friend was once a Petch," Drizzt explained. "You should know that." "Petch!" the wizard spat. "Useless little things, and always they'st in the way." Clacker took another long stride forward.
"Be on with it, drow,"
Belwar begged, futilely leaning against the huge Hookar. "Give him back his identity," Drizzt demanded. "Make our friend a Petch again, and be quick about it." "Bah!" snorted the wizard. "He is better off as he is," the unpredictable human replied. "Why would anyone wish to remain a Petch?" Clacker's breath came in a loud gasp. The sheer strength of his third stride sent Belwar skidding off to the side. "Now, wizard," Drow warned. From the ladder, Guinevere issued a long and hungry growl. "Oh, very well, the wizard spouted, throwing up his hands in disgust. "Wretched Petch!" He pulled an immense book from a pocket much too small to hold it. Drizzt and Belwar smiled to each other, thinking victory at hand. But then the wizard made a fatal mistake. "I should have killed him as I killed the others," he mumbled under his breath, too low for even Drizzt, standing right beside him to make out the words. But Hookars had the keenest hearing of any creature in the Underdark. A swipe of Clacker's enormous claw sent Belwar spiraling across the room. Drizzt, spinning about at the sound of heavy steps, was thrown aside by the momentum of the rushing giant, the drow's scimitars flying from his hands. And the wizard, the foolish wizard, patted Clacker's impact with the iron ladder, a jolt so vicious that it bowed the ladder and sent Guinevere flying off the other side. Whether the initial crushing blow of the Hookar's 500-pound body had killed the wizard was academic by the time either Drizzt or Belwar had recovered enough to call out to their friend. Clacker's hooks and beaks slashed and snapped relentlessly, tearing and crushing. Every now and then came a sudden flash and a puff of smoke as another of the many magical items that the wizard carried snapped apart. And when the Hookar had played out his rage and looked around at his three companions, surrounding him in battle-ready stances, the lump of gore at Clacker's feet was no longer recognizable. Belwar started to remark that the wizard had agreed to change Clacker back, but he didn't see the point. Clacker fell to his knees and dropped his face into his claws, hardly believing what he had done. "Let us be gone from this place," Drizzt said, sheathing his blades.
"Search it,"
Belwar suggested, thinking that marvelous treasures might be hidden within. But Drizzt could not remain for another moment. He had seen too much of himself in the unbridled rage of his giant companion, and the smell of the bloodied heap filled him with frustrations and fears that he could not tolerate. With Guinevere in tow, he walked from the tower. Belwar moved over and helped Clacker to his feet, then guided the trembling giant from the structure. Stubbornly practical, the Burrow Warden made his companions wait around while he scoured the tower, searching for items that might aid them, or for the command word that would allow him to carry the tower along. But either the wizard was a poor man, which Belwar doubted, or he had his treasure safely hidden away, possibly in some other plane of existence, for the Zwerfneblin found nothing beyond a simple water skin and a pair of worn boots. If the marvelous adamantite tower had a command word, it had gone to the grave with the wizard. Their journey home was a quiet one, lost in private concerns, regrets, and memories. Drizzt and Belwar did not have to speak their most pressing fear. In their discussions with Clacker, they both had learned enough of the normally peaceable race of Patch to know that Clacker's murderous outburst was far removed from the creature he once had been. But the Deep Gnome and the Drow had to admit to themselves, Clacker's actions were not so far removed from the creature he was fast becoming. 15. Pointed reminders. "What do you know?" Matron Malice demanded of Jarlaxle, walking at her side across the compound of House Do'Urden. Malice normally would not have been so conspicuous with the infamous mercenary, but she was worried and impatient. Reported stirring within the hierarchy of Menzo Berenzon's ruling families did not bode well for House Do'Urden. "No?" Jarlaxle echoed, feigning surprise. Malice scowled at him, as did Breeza, walking on the other side of the brash mercenary. Jarlaxle cleared his throat, though it sounded more like a laugh. He couldn't supply Malice with the details of the rumblings. He was not so foolish as to betray the more powerful houses of the city. But Jarlaxle could tease Malice with a simple statement of logic that only confirmed what she already had assumed.
Hey, Bastard, how you doing, bro?
Has been in use for a very long time.
Since you're here, let's do a dab real quick.
Her breathing inconspicuously smooth. She realized that Jarlaxle knew more than he would say, and the fact that the calculating mercenary had so coolly stated the obvious told her that her fears were justified. The spirit wraith of Zaknafein had indeed been searching for Drizzt for a very long time. Malice did not need
Let's
to
do
remind
one
her that the
of
Spider Queen was not known for
some of the banana smack.
Have you any more to tell me? Malice asked. Jarlaxle shrugged non-committal.
That one's running a little
Gone
low.
from my house, the matron mother snarled. Jarlaxle hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should demand payment for the little information he had provided. Then he dipped into one of his well-known low, hat-sweeping bows and turned for the gate. He would find his payment soon enough. In the anteroom to the house chapel an hour later, Matron Malice rested back in her throne and let her thoughts roll out into the winding tunnels of the wild Underdark. Her telepathy with the
spirit last dab of the night. I didn't realize how late it was. Hey, Rebel City. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for stopping by.
After the disturbing meeting with Jarlaxle, Malice had to learn of Zaknafein's progress. A short time later, her efforts were rewarded.
Just doing the last dab of the night before I call it in.
West, beyond the Zwerfneblin city, Jarlaxle explained to Matron Behenry. The mercenary had set out straight from House Do'Urden to the Mushroom Grove in the southern end of Menzoberranzan, to where the greatest of the Drow families were housed. The spirit wraith keeps to the chain. That is true. But Matron believes that Drake has a lead of many days, even 10 days, Jarlaxle went on. She told you this? Matron Behenry asked incredulously, amazed that Malice would reveal
Hope everyone's doing well out there.
Some information can be gathered without words, the mercenary replied slyly. Matron Malice's tone inferred much that she did not wish me to know. Matron Behenry nodded and closed her wrinkled eyes, wearied by the whole experience. She had played a role in getting Matron Malice onto the ruling council, but now she could only sit and wait to see if Malice would remain. We must trust in Matron Malice, Matron Behenry said at length. Across the room from Behenry and Jarlaxle, El Vidinvel, Matron Behenry's companion, turned his thoughts away from the conversation. The Drow mercenary had reported that Drizzt had gone west, far out from Blingdenstone, and that news carried potential importance.
Do one more of some
The Mind Flayer projected its thoughts far out to
the ruts.
issued a clear warning down the corridors that were not as
then we'll call it night, because that was of the banana.
Zaknafein knew
Let's do one of some of the ruts.
The still lake, that he had caught up to his quarry. He dropped low into the crooks and crags along the wide cavern wall and made his way about. Then he found the underground door and the cave complex beyond. Old feelings stirred in the spirit wraith, feelings of the kinship he once had known with Drizzt. New, savage emotions were quick to overwhelm them, though, as Matron Malice came into Zaknafein's mind in a wild fury. The spirit wraith burst through the door, swords drawn, and tore through the complex. A blanket flew into the air and came down in pieces as Zaknafein's sword sliced across it a dozen times. When the fit of rage had played itself out, Matron Malice's monster settled back into a crouch to examine the situation. Drizzt was not at home. It took the hunting spirit wraith a mere short time to find Drizzt and a companion, perhaps even two, had set out from a cabin a few days before. Zaknafein's practical instincts told him to lie in wait, for surely this was no phony castle, as had been the one outside the deep-known city. Surely Zaknafein's parent meant to return. The spirit wraith seized the connection rays back up the throne in the doorsill of enduring endurance. The dangerous whispers were growing louder every day, and Malice's fears and impatience cost her dearly this time. Only a few hours after Malice had driven the spirit wraith into the tunnels in pursuit of her renegade son,
all right, that one's the
returned
the
to the
ruts.
cabin by a different route. Drizzt sensed at once that something was very wrong. He drew his blades and rushed across to the ledge, springing up to the door of the cave complex before Belwar and Clacker could even begin to question him. When they arrived at the cave, they understood Drizzt's alarm. The place was destroyed, hammocks and bedrolls torn apart, bowls and a small box that had been stuffed with gathered foods smashed and thrown
Heat
to
up
every
just a
corner.
little bit more.
Clacker who could not fit inside the pond, stopped from the door and moved away. The enemy was lurking in the far reaches.
Maga Camera, Belwar roared. What monster did this?
Drizzt held up a blanket and pointed out the clean cuts in the fabric. Belwar the drow's meaning.
Blades, the Burrow Warden said grimly. Fine and crafted blades.
Blades of a drow. Drizzt finished for him.
Far are we from Menzo Baronzon?
Belwar reminded him.
Far out in the wilds, beyond the knowledge and sight of your kin.
For the bulk of his young life, Drizzt had witnessed the fanaticism that guided the lives of Lolth's foul priestesses. He himself had traveled on a way many miles to the surface of the lands, a way that suited no better purpose than to give the Spider Queen a sweet taste of the blood of surface elves. Do not underestimate Matron Malice, he said grimly.
If it is indeed your mother come to call,
Belwar growled, clapping his hands together.
she will find more than she expected waiting for her. We shall lie for her. The three of us.
No coincidence. Matron Malice will be prepared for whatever we have to offer.
Oh, that was a little hot.
You cannot know that.
Hell yeah. Have a good one, sorry. I'm probably going to call it in tonight, too.
Drifted out of his voice. They gathered what few usable items
Just because it's already pretty late.
Again going west to put even more distance between themselves and Menzo Baron. They took up the lead. Would willingly put themselves. Belwar walked in the middle, the solid anchor of the party, and Drizzt floated along silently far to the rear, taking it upon himself to protect his friend if his mother's agents should catch up to them. Belwar had reasoned that they might have a whoever ruined their home. The perpetrators had set off in pursuit of them from the cave complex, following their trail.
This is almost over. Well, everyone, I'm going to call into this live for right now. It's already gotten pretty late. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by, and everyone who keeps stopping by chilling with me. Definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.